When it comes to meetings, I think there's lots of frustration about how many meetings we have, whether they're useful or purposeful, and we've got some different videos that maybe where we can share with you some of our thoughts about making your meetings more purposeful. But in this video, what we really wanted to talk about in terms of is what meetings should you have, and what's the rhythm and rigor you put around meetings, and why do they exist. So I think the easiest way to start with this is to maybe put it into some timelines. So ask yourself, are there things you should be meeting about on a daily basis? We'd call that a bit of a huddle. Are there things that you should be meeting on weekly, monthly, quarterly, or even annually? And I think the key thing there is to think about, what is the purpose of those? So, if you even need a daily meeting, it's probably just a very short, sharp, just checking in with each other, just making sure we're on track. In terms of weekly meetings, they probably really should be there to inform and update each other within a team, so that we all know if there's anything that happened we should have known about, or anything that's up and coming that we need to be aware of, so that we're all on the same page. And I think when you get then into monthly meetings, it's much more than about accountability. That's probably a reason why things like board meetings and management meetings happen monthly. It's an opportunity to stop and check in with each other and make sure we're being held accountable to our goals, we're achieving our goals, and maybe work on any big issues that we need to overcome as we move forward. I think then when you get into the quarterly type meetings, they're usually more strategic. So quarterly meetings are probably about strategic momentum and making sure we're on track with our strategy and our continuous improvement. And then annually is probably linked to that, which is probably more like that annual reset. And strategy would be another good example of an annual reset. So I think probably the thing to think about here in terms of your meetings is what do you actually need for your business? I think there's not many businesses that probably need those daily huddles, but of course there are some, and you may be one of those. I think from experience, I haven't met many businesses that benefit from that weekly kind of checking in with each other, informing and updating. I think the challenges there are that businesses make it too formal, or they're ill-disciplined to doing it. And I often use language around weekly meetings that they should be formal yet informal. When I mean formal in terms of they should be set and they should happen, and probably having a regular time slot and a regular format is really important, and that people recognise they should be there. But I think the event itself should be fairly short and fairly informal, otherwise it becomes too onerous. Minutes and actions and notes around weekly meetings, often is the reason they dwindle. But when those weekly sort of check-ins with each other are consistent, it usually means that communication is better, less problems arise, and there's probably less to deal with at those monthly meetings where we're holding each other accountable, because that stuff's kind of being dealt with on a day-to-day basis. So then those monthly meetings can be much more about dealing with the big challenges, being a little bit more strategic, which obviously then leads itself into quarterly and the annual meetings if you're in a sort of senior leadership and more strategic position. So have a think about your meeting rhythm and rigor. My last thought is not just for you as a leadership team, but then what about all the teams beneath you, and maybe the functions? What's operations and sales version of this? What's the senior management team's version of this? I think when you can start to map all that out, you can very quickly start to make sure that every group of people has got the right amount of meetings in the right place, and that you don't get that overlap and that kind of wasted effort of too many people in the same meetings. That is so frustrating for so many individuals. Good luck.